Thank you, Birbuk. So today, since I'm a lawyer, so you might have seen and heard some of the incidents, some of my colleagues, what they have done in last few days. So my journey into public interest litigation, it started way back in 2014 in this tiny village in Gujranwala, which is in rural Punjab. That is when I filed a public interest litigation on behalf of families of 18 laborers who had passed away while working in a stone crushing factory in Gujranwala. These laborers, they died due to the fact that they contracted an incurable disease, and incurable lung disease, which eventually led to their deaths. So what followed was a harrowing tale of exploitation, lack of national labor standards, and an abject failure of the state to protect the most marginalized sections of the society. So this is precisely I'm going to talk about today, that lawyers can sometime and activists can help to protect the rights of the most marginalized sections of the society, what you can also call perhaps little Pakistanis. So very briefly, what are the facts of the case? The facts are that the background story to this journey starts from me being really angry. So sometimes anger can be perhaps good and can lead to some positive results. So it happened so that I was visiting my village in one summer, and I know someone, a Maulana was announcing in a mosque that a person had died. And I asked her, like, what was the cause of his death? And it turned out that he was a sixth person from one small tiny family who had passed away. And then it turned out, we started counting, my father and I, that 18 laborers from this small village in Gujranwala had passed away. And to my shock and horror, no one knew that what was the exact cause of the death. And then I started asking around people that, look, 18 people have passed away from this tiny village, and some of they are very well-to-do people. So did anyone ever try to find out that why have they died, was the reason for the death? And since all of them died after working in one single factory, so did anyone ever confront that factory? And since that factory is still up and running and probably is killing more people, so it turned out no one knew the exact cause of their deaths. They would say it was a mysterious disease. No one knows what disease it is. But two facts came out clearly. A, anyone who got this disease, they eventually passed away. The people who were surviving at that time, all of them, they were 4 at that time back in 2014, they have passed away. And the second was that it was a lungs disease. So, and it turned out that there was a high rate of death among these workers. So once we did some simple maths, and it turned out that almost 95% of workers who ever worked in this factory, they passed away. So I thought maybe it was just a one-off incident. But then I started asking around, and it turned out that there were dozens of factories, similar factories in Gujranwala, and each factory was perhaps on average employing a dozen people. So it means that once I did simple maths and calculations, so there were people who had worked in one of these factories for 6 months and up to 3 years, all of them died except one person. So that means I noticed a pattern. So after employing these workers from a particular area for a year or two, this factory owner, then he would move to another area to recruit more workers. And by that time, I started investigating. Now he was recruiting workers from South Punjab. So, but the sad thing was that no one knew what disease it was. And then I did some Google search and talked to a few pulmonologists, and it turned out that it wasn't such a mysterious disease. It was just like apathy of people for people who were dispossessed. And this disease was one of the oldest diseases known to mankind, is silicosis. And it is incurable, which explained so many deaths. And then the other aspect was that its symptoms were similar to TB. So what ended up happening that all of these laborers, their families, they were poor people, so they didn't have much savings. Many a time they would have a cattle, a couple of goats. So their families would spend each and every penny trying to cure their loved ones, and they wouldn't succeed because it was inherently an incurable disease unless you somehow replace your lungs, which is perhaps very expensive if it is possible at all. So both of these aspects, they had profound ramifications for the families because A, they wouldn't know what was killing so many people, and B, they would spend everything that they had, and rather than being at home, their 5 to 10 years of their age, of their last end of their time life on earth would be spent in different hospitals. They would start from their local Hakim in village and all the way to go to Gulab Devi Hospital. And it was shocking to discover that not even in these best hospitals of Punjab, they were correctly diagnosed. So while doing this research, I met this one guy, Safdar Ali, which perfectly captured that what is the human cost of defenselessness and how sometimes law can come to aid of these families. So Safdar Ali, I was doing this collecting information. So at the end of our meeting, he asked me that, do you think something is going to come out of my death, or is it going to go in vain as well? And I was shocked by his direct and almost accusatory tone and question. And it made perfect sense because his one brother and 2 cousins had already passed away. Like, brother passed away 6 months, cousins, they had passed away in the last 2 years. So I was just a student at that time, studying getting my law degree. So just to comfort a dying man, I said, okay, don't worry, we'll do something and we'll make sure that it doesn't happen to other, and we'll take care of your family. And it happened so that after a week of this meeting, when I took this picture, he passed away. It was this slow, painful death because, as you can see, his arms, a person just is reduced to a skeleton. They are bedridden for some time, for even a year or two. It's a very, very painful death. And this was he was the 4th person in his family. So since it was summer vacations, I started doing some rounds of several other factories. This is what a typical stone crushing factory looked like. As you can see, the dust is very fine dust, silica dust. That's what people inhale. So at that time, a bunch of students and also people, we got together. One of them is here, Shafaf. I was interning with them, and a friend of mine, Yaya Fareed. So we got together and we filed a human rights application before Supreme Court, since Supreme Court was taking suo motu notices left, right, and center. And I was like, if there are issues that merit serious attention, this is the sort of issues, human rights issues, that Supreme Court should be dealing with, perhaps. And in this process, later, Supreme Court finally, on our application, took up a suo motu notice. And what eventually happened, so we cobbled together a team. Primarily, we were young people. Then another senior lawyer, Raheel Kamran Sheikh, he greatly helped us. So the Supreme Court's taking up notice of this issue and also extended and complex proceedings, it resulted in several benefits for the society and also immediately for these families. So what were those benefits? So these families that I initially started working with, they got compensation of 56 lakh rupees, not much, but it was at least something to begin with. Safdar's family, they got 6 lakh rupees because his wife, 2 of her husbands, Safdar and Safdar's brother, had passed away. And then he left 3 kids. She got admitted them to school. And then it also, most importantly, as a immediate result, gave access to justice to these little Pakistanis. And then, more importantly, it helped us to assess the true impact, the scale of this problem. So there was this 150 people died from one village in Dera Ghazi Khan. There were 200 others who were suffering at that time, and many of them have passed away in these 5 years. And then there's this one factory in Sheikhupura that killed 35 people. And the factory I started work with, initially 18 people, it turned out that there were like 36 people who had passed away. Finally, the crowning achievement of this public interest litigation was these two laws. There were other directions as well that were eventually passed, Punjab Occupational Health and Safety Act. And in all of this, and this is for every other people who might be interested in similar work, is one of the greatest partners that I came across, apart from the judiciary, obviously, was media. And they were of tremendous help. They made people aware, judges, all these stakeholders, and most importantly, the laborers themselves, the primary stakeholder of all of this process. For the first time, people got to know that it wasn't a mysterious disease. It was not ordained by God. It was perfectly preventable disease, which is incurable, but if you just take certain precautionary measures, you can prevent this disease. And all of these techniques that I learned during this litigation, I recently employed them. And other case, public interest litigation that I did on behalf of Salahuddin's family, you might have heard, he was tortured to death, a mentally disabled person in Rahimiyar Khan. And ultimately, people were of great help. Thank you.